Good evening. Blessing once again to be in the house of the Lord tonight. Studied a portion of God's word. Jerry asked, what was the good news? The good news is we're still here. No matter what we're going through, we're still here. People are going through storms. People don't have health storms, faith storms, all kinds of issues. But as long as we're here, that's a good thing. Is that right? And as the people of God, we know that God is with us. So whatever it is we're going through, we're not going through it alone. This series is rapidly coming to a close. We have been studying this series, Life Happens, How to Handle It, since January. It is now June. So for 6 months we have been studying this series, and at the end of this month we conclude this series. I want you to know, and I want to go on record as saying that this has not been an exhaustive study. I've had to see why, I had to paint broad strokes because there was a lot of material, a lot of information that had to be covered in a short period of time. And so for the few moments that we had in the class, and the short period of time that we had to do this series, I had to cover a lot of material. And I hope that you've been keeping up with the handouts and printed material that have been supplied, because there's a lot of information contained in those handouts that I didn't have time to cover in our time in class. But I want you to know that I have grown in studying for this series, and I hope that you have grown too. My objective in this series has been to help us to look at life from a divine perspective. To look at life not just as things that happen to us, but understand the fact that things that happen to us, there is a purpose for those things happening to us. We may not always understand what it is. And not only is there a purpose for things happening to us, God has a purpose for how we handle situations in life. And when you have a divine perspective on life, it makes a difference in how you handle life circumstances. Isn't that right? Last week we looked at the divine pattern for relationships. We mentioned last week that God created us for relationships. That we were created by God to have a relationship with Him, our Creator, to have a relationship with ourselves, to have a relationship with our fellow man, to have a relationship with the environment, and to have a relationship with the animal kingdom. Isn't that right? In fact, our very existence on this planet is determined by the relationship. We looked last week at some principles. We looked at a divine principle last week contained in Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 beginning, where I showed you that God's divine principle is that seed produces after its kind. And I applied that to, the environment, and I applied it to our relationships, and I demonstrated that when you violate that principle, there are consequences to be paid. And we looked at last week the fact that because we have environmentally violated that principle, we are suffering some consequences for that even today. Then we talked last week about the fact that the foundation is crucial to any relationship. Regardless of the nature of the relationship, the foundation is a crucial part of it. And I said that we need to invest time in the relationship. Whenever you go into a foundation of a relationship, whether it's a business relationship, interpersonal relationship, whatever the nature of the relationship is, invest time in laying a good foundation. Because the foundation of the relationship is going to determine whether or not the relationship withstands the storms of life. And every relationship will go through storms. And it's the foundation that it's built upon that will determine whether or not it withstands that storm. Then we talked last week about some keys to relationships. We talked about 4 keys last week. And next week I'm going to give you a whole handout. I'm going to go through a whole list of things for successful relationships. But I gave you 4 last week. And those 4 were honesty, right? Communication, compassion, and commitment. Those are 4 things that are essential to having a healthy relationship, right? Tonight, we want to talk about God's design for the home. That's important because the home is the backbone of society. That as we are trained in our homes, our character is shaped in the home. Our attitude about relationships, our attitude,
Right here. Static. The static. Static.
The relationships to society is determined by the home. A person's character is shaped in the home, their worldview, their attitude towards relationships, their attitude towards life is shaped in the home. And so as you grow up and then move out into society, what we see in society is the product of people's home training or a lack thereof. Isn't that right? Now, before we get into a handout, I have a handout that I'm going to give to you, but before I give you that handout, let me just ask you some questions about the home. What are some of the issues that we have today in today's home? In the husband-wife relationship, in the relationship between black men and black women, interracial relationship, whatever the nature of the relationship, what are some of the issues that we have today? Financial issues. That's a biggie. Because a lot of relationships have problems that stem from financial issues. Put some new batteries in that for me, please, Dick. What else? Financial issues? Infidelity, unfaithfulness, creeping, tipping. Whatever you want to call it, all the same thing. Go ahead.
The very foundation of the home, the way God designed it.
Right. And that's what we're here to talk about.
You see so
But
many.
before we talk about God's design for the home, I want to find out what some of the issues are so that when we get to the design, you'll see why these are issues. All right? Children acting up. Acting up, acting out, acting a fool, all of that. Communication.
Incest.
It's a big word. And it's true. Common. Very common. A lot of people have issues today because of incestuous stuff that happened to them decades ago. So that is a big one. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Disrespectful one another.
Come get these handouts from me. Go ahead, sis. Don, come pass these handouts from me, please.
Blended family issues.
Uh-huh.
Blended family.
Blended family, and thankfully, Tim is covering some of these issues in his class. I think on Sundays he's teaching a series on the blended family, so he's dealing with some of the issues. Thank you. That occurs in blended families.
Homosexuality, as
Ah,
well as drugs and,
homosexuality.
yeah.
All right. And we're going to talk about all that stuff. Go ahead, sis.
That changes things in the
Health issues. Right. And that's true. That's very true. All right, does everyone have a handout? I need someone to read an introduction. There you go.
In order to see the
Oh,
importance,
we need a-
in order to see the importance of the divine design of marriage, one needs only look into the world in which we live. In it, we see all manner of crime, cruelty, and every evil deed. In every society around the world, These violations of God's divine plan for marriage are being carried out by the products of someone's home. They are someone's sons and daughters. Listed below is God's divine design for the marriage and family. If followed, our communities, cities, and the world would be a better place in which to live.
Thank you. The divine design. Number one, God's design for the family. And we talked about it last week, Genesis chapter 1. Male and female. That is God's design for the family. Someone get for me Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. And we read last week, Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, when he talked about, God created man in his own image, after the image of God created him, male and female created he them. You going to read this? Okay, get a mic. Yeah, you do need a mic. You want to read it, you need a mic. We got to put it into the record. Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. Read.
Haven't you read, he responded, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and will be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore what God has joined, let man not separate.
Thank you. What God joined together. Notice he said, therefore, what God joined together. When we have marriage vows, and then we say who God had joined together. The book said what God had joined together. And what God had joined together is the male and the female. And why did I bring that up? Because we live in a society now where male is marrying male, female is marrying female. Isn't that right? Right. And in some cases, in some states, it is legal. Isn't that right? Now, what do you do when in the state it's legal, but God's word says that's not the pattern?
Stay with the word.
Huh?
Stay with the word.
Stay with the word. But you know what? That is not a popular position.
Yes, sir.
And you remember I said that we were going to talk about this. We can talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. You want to talk about sex, we can talk about sex. You want to talk about anything, but we're going to talk about it from God's word. And I established that God's word is the objective standard. It doesn't matter what society says. It doesn't matter what's legal in the world. If it violates God's principle, it's wrong. Isn't that right? Right. Yes, it causes trouble in the home. That causes trouble in society. Because there are all kinds of court cases pending right now in society. And here's some of the problems that it causes in society. You have situations. You remember I said that the home is where the character is shaped and where the attitudes about society and the world is shaped. Well, when you raise a child in a situation where you have two daddies or two mamas, they're not going to get what God designed for that child to get in the home. Something is going to be off. And so you're gonna rear a child, get the brother like you're gonna rear a child in a situation, in an environment where something is off. Now, I'm not saying that two men can't be good parents. Yeah, you need a mic. You want
No,
to
I
say-
was speaking to somebody, I was letting somebody.
Please wait on it. Oh. I thought he was waiting for that. All right. Number two. God's design. That a person leave father and mother and cleave unto his wife. That's God's design. Isn't that right? That's right. Part of the problem, one of the problems that we have, and we read that last week, Genesis chapter 2, verse 22. Get it from the Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. God only has to say something one time for it to be important. Isn't that right? But this is stated 3 times in the scripture. This idea about leaving and cleaving is stated 3 times. It's stated in Genesis chapter 2, verse 22, Matthew chapter 19, verse 9, and Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. Now, if something is important enough for God to repeat 3 times, I would think that it was important. Isn't that right? Ephesians 5, verse 31 says what?
Mr. Green,
Agrees that you got that microwave read. Go ahead, read it. I know you can get it.
For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you, in particular, so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband.
Thank you. So you see, this idea of leaving and cleaving is really tied to the Lord's relationship with the church. And we're going to explore that a little deeper. Then you want to say something?
Yeah, that's the reason why it's important to know what the scriptures say that, so when we're dealing with someone or talking to someone, we'll just put the focus on what the book says and not on what we think or feel about. And then just deal with the book. But if they don't have God in their life anyway, it's a lost cause anyway, so.
You remember when we first, in the first class about relationships, I laid the foundation.
Yeah.
And you remember I said that in order to successfully and effectively deal with this topic, we have to have an objective standard, and that's God's word.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't change. You know, people have opinions about everything. There are a lot of strong opinions about homosexuality and a whole lot of other stuff going on in the world. But my opinion doesn't count in the long run. Your opinion doesn't count in the long run. What really matters is what does God's word say about it. Right? And so when you understand, when you're talking to someone about these kind of issues, you have to point them to the standard.
Yes.
Because how we feel about it is not the standard. What we think about it is not the standard. God's word is the standard.
True.
And it's by God's word that we will be judged about it. Isn't that right? Right. So some of these things, as I said, they're hot button topics in society. That's only because society, in some cases, have deviated from the divine pattern. I remember in New Orleans, there was an inscription over a courtroom that said, man's law is only declamatory of and subordinate to divine law. And what that meant was that man's law, civil law, should declare God's law. And it should fall under, it should line up under God's law. That's what man's law, that's what civil law should do. That's not what it does in every case. In some cases, man's law has gone totally away from God's law. But God's law is the one that counts. Isn't that right? And that's the one that we have to judge these things by. Now understand, none of us are in a position to condemn people. It is not my position to condemn anyone, because I don't have heaven or hell to put anyone in. But it is my responsibility to teach God's word on any given subject. You know, I can have an opinion about something just like anyone else can, but my opinion doesn't matter any more than anyone else's does, if God's word has spoken on it. Isn't that right?
Right.
Now, the problem with leaving and cleaving, and what that has to do with is outside influences on the home. A lot of problems within the home stems from people outside of the home having undue influence in the home. It is all right to seek advice, from people. It is all right to get counseling from people. But husband and wife should decide what goes on in their in their house. Mother-in-law and father-in-law shouldn't dictate what goes on in your house. Friends and neighbors, boyfriends and girlfriends shouldn't dictate what goes on in your house. Isn't that right? Hey. But it is the husband and wife's responsibility to do that. Because people will interfere if you let them. People will only go as far as you let them. You have to be the one to say, hey, I can't have you having that kind of influence in my home. I can't have you cutting down my husband or cutting down my wife. You have to draw that line. All right, let's move on. Time is running away. Number 3, God's pattern for the home. One man, one woman for life. That's a biggie in today's society. And you remember a couple of weeks ago, I quoted you the stat. The divorce rate is over 50%. Isn't that right? The divorce rate for second marriage is over 60%. The divorce rate for third marriage is over 74%. Being married to one person for a lifetime is difficult in this society. But it is still God's law. It is still God's pattern. The good news is that Jesus came and died for those of us who didn't keep that. And that we have access to the grace of God, and God, bless us even when we messed up and we fell short of the pattern. But the pattern is one man, one woman for a lifetime. All right? That principle is found in Romans chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. And that's where we get the concept, till death do us part. We shall remain. Here we go. Hold on a second. Give this to the other mic. Go ahead, Michelle.
Do you not know, brothers, for I am speaking to men who know the law, that the law has authority over a man only as long as he lives? For an example, by law, a married woman is bound to her husband as long as he is alive. But if her husband dies, she is released from the law of marriage. So then, if she marries another man while her husband is still alive, she is called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is released from the law and is not an adulteress, even though she marries another man.
That's the law. That's God's pattern.
Okay, I want to.
Go ahead, Sid.
I need a clearer understanding. So if her husband dies, the first one, and she marries another man, she's an adulteress.
What he's saying is, the principle is, the design is, one man, one woman for life. But, and that's a covenant. That's a covenant, yeah. But if one of them dies, then they're released from that covenant to marry someone else. Huh? God knows that.
It also said that if she marries again, while he's still alive.
Yeah, that's a key. As long as that's what Romans 7 talks about. As long as they're alive, they're still in that covenant. Now, like I said, in today's society, a lot of people break that covenant. A lot of people, get divorced and remarry, for.
They said that's okay. I mean, so you
Who said that's okay? But that's why we established at the beginning that God's word is the standard. Now, like I said, thank God we had grace. Thank God Jesus came and died for those of us who didn't keep that. Those who failed in that area. But what we're talking about is God's design. And in everything we've listed so far, man has violated. That's why the world is in the shape it's and that's why we're talking about this. Because all of the stuff that's going on in the world today is the result of people not following the divine design. All right?
But Mike, we can't just stop there. When he said that if her husband dies, she's free to marry. Because there is another scripture that says she's free to marry someone that's within the Lord.
There are a lot of dynamics, and
Yeah.
like I said, we're speaking with a broad.
Okay.
I don't have time to
We
go
did
through
go
all
into
the
that.
dynamics
We did
of
have
that.
that.
But yeah, that's a whole series by itself.
Yes.
We definitely don't have time to deal with that tonight. What I'm doing is I'm giving you a pattern, divine pattern. And you remember I said at the beginning of the class, we have to sweep with broad strokes because we're limited by time and we have a lot of material to cover. If you want to talk about that some more, then we can do it privately, but we don't have time in class to deal with it. All right? Number 4. God's design. We're talking about God's design, right? God's design for the home is that husband is the head and the wife be submissive to her husband. Fasten your seatbelts.
Yes.
Fasten your seatbelts. Question. Someone may say, well, what if my husband is not a Christian? What if my husband is dumb?
Yeah.
Or if my husband is, alcoholic, drug addict, or he go out to the casino, spend all of the bill money, all of this stuff. What if he does all of that? Is he still the head? Yes. Yes. Well, my husband is dumb. Well, you just got a dumb head.
That's right.
But he's still the head. Now that's a whole nother question. That's a whole nother issue that we get ready to get to. No, I'll get to it. But understand, I'm trying to keep y'all focused that what we're talking about is the divine pattern. And like I said, in all of these things, there's a 3 or 4 week series in all of these, in every line item that I have on there. I can take a month.
You got
to
all
teach a workshop on it.
You got all fan.
But, yeah, they're fanning because time. Okay. Now, in the survey sheet that, I thought I had, in the survey sheet at the beginning of the series, when I passed out survey sheets and I asked y'all to write down topics y'all wanted us to talk about, someone said in this survey sheet, well, what if my husband, is not a Christian? He's not responsible. Who takes the lead role? Who is the leader of the household when the husband is not responsible? Nope. Sorry. I told y'all fasten y'all seatbelts. I told you.
Don't you buy it?
The plan is, and see, that's why last week or week before I said that you need to invest time in the foundation of the relationship. When you get into a relationship, people jump into relationships too fast, and because of how somebody looks, how much money they make, what they drive, where they work, they jump into it. But you don't invest time to build that foundation, to find out what a person is made of, how that person reacts to the issues and storms of life. People don't take time to do that. And then they jump into a relationship, and then when these issues happen, you find out you married a fool. Time, that's how you know. If you date them long enough, situations will arise where you will see how they handle it.
6 months.
Huh? Go ahead. You want to say something?
Okay, I was just saying, because the unexpected happens, and, people that can catch people off guard. So, how much time do you think is required?
Well, there is no hard rule as to how much time. Me, personally, I say 2 years. I believe that in 2 years you have gone through enough stuff to see what the person is about. If you date somebody for 3 weeks, you know, and they look good, they smell good, and all this stuff in 3 weeks, well, they can behave real well for 3 weeks, you know. But then when the storm of life hit and you find out that this person, you know, like Tim said, you go from Denzel Washington to Mike Tyson, you know, you find out what the person is really made of. But it takes time, that's the point. How much time? It depends on
Just need a green
situation. But you have to have time, you have to invest the time in the foundation. Because once you're married to that person, you enter into that covenant. You bound to that person. That husband, that man is your head. Regardless of how he acts, he's still the head. Now, there's some other dynamics we get ready to get into. But he's still the head. Go ahead. Somebody want to say something? Okay. All right, now, next issue. Let's see, I had a question. I'm gonna leave that. Go ahead.
Okay, you said 2 years?
Huh?
2 years?
I said that's my
Oh,
opinion.
that's yours.
That's not, there's nowhere written, the Bible doesn't say how long it takes somebody.
No, I know the Bible.
And so I can't give you a definite, definitive time when the Bible doesn't give one. But I can tell you that you have to invest enough time to find out what that person is made of.
But even still, after 2 years,
You gotta be real good after 2 years
you,
to put on the
you
front.
say you think you know.
Hey, for
and
some
then-
people, it may be 3, it may be 5. There is no hard number, like I said. But what you want to do is you want to date the person long enough to have gone through stuff. See how the person deals with storms, see how the person deals with pressure, how the person deals with stress, how the person deals with all of the things
Then when
of
that
life.
first storm comes through, he's gone.
Huh?
I said when the first storm comes through, he's gone.
Then you know that wasn't the one.
Do you say thank you,
That's
Jesus?
what I'm saying. You have to spend more time with it.
But it can't be now.
We say thank you, Jesus?
Yeah, say thank you, Jesus. That's how you do that.
You cannot.
All right? Now, I want to get to, huh? No, we talking about David. We talking about David. We talking about laying that foundation right now. Now, let's get to another issue here. Let me see how many of these I have. Okay. Cool. I got 2 more I need to get to, but let me address this other one that you brought up. What if your spouse, your head, is a fool? If he forbids you to go to church, or he tries to get you to do something that's contrary to the will of God, do you still have to obey him? The answer is no. The answer is no. Acts chapter 5, verse 29. The council tried to get Peter to stop preaching the name of Jesus. They forbade him under threat of violence. They said, if you preach under this name, we're going to deal with you. Peter said, Acts chapter 5, verse 29, we ought to obey God rather than man. Whenever there's a situation where man is in violation or conflict with God, you have to choose God. Someone get from Matthew chapter 10. Let's read that. Matthew chapter 10, beginning with verse 32. Go ahead.
Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge
Come
him.
on, let Mike go to you, my sister.
Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven.
Read.
Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies would be the members of his own household.
Read that again.
A man's enemies will be the members of his own household.
Read.
Of his own household.
That's right.
Read.
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 Oh, read.
Yeah.
Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his sons or daughters more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it.
Thank you. Do you see what the Lord said? He said he didn't come to send peace.
That's right.
He came to send a sword. Sword represents division. He says, for a man's foe shall be they in a house. Now keep in mind, he's speaking in the context of people who's willing to follow him versus people who's not interested in following him. So if you are in a household where your whole family doesn't have anything to do with God, they don't care anything about, your relationship with God. In fact, they're trying to pull you away from God. Jesus said, if you choose them, you're not worthy of me. And anyone who loves them more than they love me is not worthy of me. And that's why he says, they who are not willing to take up their cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. Sometimes, brothers and sisters, it requires a choice on your part. Sometimes you have to make some hard decisions, even in your own household. Isn't that right? Yes. But Jesus said, if you do not choose me, he has to come first before your mother, your father, your wife, your husband, your sister, your brother, your children, and your own self. He has to be number one. And in any given situation, if he is not number one, you are not worthy to be his disciple. Now that brings me to another issue that I hear a lot about. The concept of being unequally yoked together. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 17 talks about not being unequally yoked together with unbelievers. I know Christians who believe and teach that it is a sin for a Christian to be married to a non-Christian simply because the other person is a non-Christian. That is not what that text is teaching. I have debated brothers on that issue. It is a sin in as much as, and see the context of what he's talking about. I wrote an extensive paper on that. If anybody's interested in the copy, I'll let me know. I'll make you a copy. But what Paul is dealing with, Paul is talking about a situation where in Corinth, these people came out of pagan worship, and people came out of idolatrous worship. They came out of a really wicked society. And some of them, because of their relationship with the people in the world after they had become Christians, these people were drawing them back out into the world. Paul was saying, don't be yoked up with people who are going to pull you away from the Lord. And so to be unequally yoked means to be in, and it's not just a marriage relationship, it's any relationship. It's a business relationship, it's a personal relationship, any relationship that causes a Christian to, be drawn back away from God as opposed to being drawn to God is being unequally yoked. And the scriptures teach that you come out of that relationship. Now it doesn't teach, and the reason why I know it doesn't teach that it's a sin for a Christian to be married to a non-Christian simply because the person is non-Christian, because Paul teaches in other places. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. If a Christian is married to a non-Christian, and the non-Christian is content to live with that person, the Christian should put him away. There are a lot of places.
It also says what was light happened to the darkness of
Peter also teaches in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, that if a Christian wife is married to a non-Christian husband, that her behavior can win that non-Christian husband to Christ. So if it was a sin, he wouldn't tell her, he would tell her to leave. So I know it's not a sin just because the person is not a Christian. But we all, if you're in any situation where the person or the relationship is drawing you away from God, that's unequally yoked. And the Bible teaches you to get out of that situation. Go ahead,
And real quick, and it does not teach to marry within your own race, because I have heard people go there and make that a race. See, folks stay within your own race.
Well, you are supposed to marry within your own race.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying, That's why it's at the beginning of the class, what are some of the issues? You know? And a lot of people make a big deal about interracial relationship. You know, you are supposed to marry within your race, but it's the human race.
What about it?
Any ethnic group, now there are issues associated with all of this stuff. You know, and because of the environment that we live in, because of the world we live in, the prejudices and so forth, you have to take all that into consideration. You know, but it's not a sin, because as long as the person is a human. Go ahead, and as long as it's a male and a female, it's all right. Go ahead.
That's it.
But you also got to remember, if you're a Christian, you know. So when you look at someone or you get into a covenant, even though that person is not bound by the covenant because they're not a Christian, you knew you were a Christian, you've been taught. And so you look over and that guy looks like $1 million. He's tall, handsome, got millions of dollars. But you get into this relationship, it's not his fault because you decided you wanted him and now you married him because he doesn't understand what you know you've been taught. So you want to hold and bind into it. You are yourself committed to saying, well, you know, because the Bible says he's going to judge you more because you knew. Just because you saw him out there and you liked him, and then you try to force him into a relationship and force him to be a Christian, which we don't do anything under compulsion, guess who's the sinner? It's the person who wasn't a believer and got with that fool in the first place. You made that covenant, you bought that ugly truck, you drive that ugly truck.
Here's the issue.
That's fun every day.
And you know, there's a principle in retail called buy it, beware.
That's right, buy it, beware.
Once you buy it, you're stuck with it once you buy it. That's why you do your research before you buy it. Yeah. That's why you make sure you have all the information you need before you buy it, so that when you buy it, you make an informed decision. But if you buy it just because you walk on the line and look pretty, you never even turn the engine on. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's move on. I got 10 minutes. I got to finish this. Number 5. God's design for the home. Husbands, love your wife. Wives, reverence your husband. Ephesians chapter 5, someone. Verses 25 through 33. Now let me ask you this before we begin. What does it mean? And why did he say, husband, love your wives, but wives, reverence your husband? Why not husband and wife love each other and reverence each other? Why did he distinguish love one, reverence the other?
One heart.
Huh?
Yeah.
No takers on that? All right.
What was the question again? I can't.
It's honor. And the same way that you look at, like some people want to be everything, but they don't understand why is it a mother is higher than anything on this earth in order to be a mother. People, and when you see that film, people revere their mother, they honor. And the same way you have a soldier is honored. They know, if you know that your husband's on the warpath for God, and you know he's God's soldier, and you know he's trying to do what he's supposed to do for God, then because God has put so much responsibility on him, you revere him. He loves you, and that's his job. Whether he likes it or not, it's just his job. But a lot of do without compulsion. So now you honor that man in the same way we honor our elders. Do you revere them?
Okay.
Does it have something to do with a woman's childbearing?
Yeah, we get ready to read that. You're exactly right there. Go ahead.
I was asking, does it have something to do with a woman being able to bear children?
Let's read it. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25 again. We're going to read it. Ephesians 5, 25 through 33.
Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. That loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband.
Okay, thank you. Now, first of all, understand what it means when he said, love your wife. And he gave an example. He said, husband, love your wife, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. And then he goes on to give, the explanation for that. Now, for the sake of time, I don't have time to read, but on the back of your handout, I have another handout about love. And I broke down what love is. First of all, let's define what love we're talking about here. He's talking about, in that text, agape love. In the Greek language, there are 4 words that's translated by one English word, love. You have the word eros, which is where we get our English word erotic. Erotic. And that is sensual, that's a physical, that's a sexual kind of love. Then you have the word storge. Storge is the kind of love that you have for your parents, that parents have for their children. It's a family kind of love. Then you have the word phileo. Phileo is where we get our English word Philadelphia, and it means brotherly love. It's the brotherly kind of love you have for your friends and those who are close to you. Then you have the Greek word, agape. Agape is unconditional love. Now, all these other words, eros, storge, phileo, these are all conditional. Eros is conditional on how you feel. Storge is conditioned upon your relationship with your family. Phileo is conditioned upon, your friendship, your relationship as a friend. But agape love is an unconditional love. Agape love is not a love because of, it's a love in spite of. Agape love seeks the best interest of the object of your love. Let me give you an example. If a baby, you have a newborn baby wakes up 2 o'clock in the morning, screaming, crying, soaking wet. You just went to bed at 1 o'clock. You're tired, right? But the baby wakes up screaming and hollering. You get up and you change the baby and you feed the baby. Why? Because you love that baby. Because you are seeking the best interest of that baby above yourself. And so you sacrificially, sacrifice your rest to get up and take care of the baby. That's agape love. All right? It may not be something you feel like, but it's something you do because you know it's in the best interest. That's the kind of love God had for us. And that's the kind of love that we should have as Christians, one for another, and as husbands for our wives. And there was a list of it. I don't have time to go through it. That's why I gave you the handout. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, Paul outlines all of the characteristics of agape love. Go ahead.
But we should not take advantage of that. A lot of times we take advantage of the ones that we know that love us. And, it's like expecting so much out of a person. We can't do that. We should always be considerate of each other and, not make it so overwhelming on one person, because what it does, it breaks it down. We also have to take into consideration your spouse is going to be the one when you get older, is really going to be the one to look after you. You don't want to wear them down.
Right.
Because if you do that, they can't take care of you, it'd be hard for them to take care of themselves.
And in every situation where man is involved, there are some abuses
Yeah.
of that. But you're absolutely right. We should take care not to abuse them, especially God's love.
That's right.
Especially God's love. You know?
Yeah.
Now, that's the 5 minutes. No. All right. Now, reverence. Your hand was up, sis? Yep. Your hand was up? Okay. Reverence. Men and women are wired different. They are built different. Wife should love her husband, but the emphasis with a man is on respect. I don't know why, that's what we built, you know. And one of the things that Satan does to undermine the marital relationship, the husband-wife relationship, is he causes the man to feel disrespected by his wife, and he causes the wife to feel unloved by her husband. And the result of that is chaos in the home. Isn't that right?
Right.
And well, I don't have time to go to it, but all the way back in the Garden of Eden, one of the devil's tricks was to reverse God's order. The serpent wasn't even supposed to approach Eve. Eve wasn't supposed to deal with him. Adam was supposed to deal with him.
Yes.
But he reversed the order. And because he reversed the order, and Eve did something that she didn't want Adam to deal with. Adam didn't step up and deal with it, and as a result, the battle of the sexes was born. Because the result, the punishment was, God said to the serpent, because you did this thing, you're going to crawl in your belly all the days, you're like, woman, man, because you did this thing, you're going to, the ground, you're going to work, hold up, I got to get this out. All right? Because you did this thing, you're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow. Your life is going to be hard. Because of the woman, because she did this thing, she's going to be, her desire is going to be to her own husband. Now here's what that means. The word desire means to control by manipulation. Since Adam and Eve reversed God's order, the consequences of that, the relationship between man and woman is going to be affected because the woman is now going to try to rule by manipulation and the man is going to try to rule by domination. And it's going to cause clash. Brothers and sisters, it's been happening ever since the Garden of Eden. Women have been manipulating men, men have been trying to dominate women, and they've been fighting against it, and it's been this ever since. Isn't that right? Amen. Let me get this last one, then I'll have time to bring you to persistence. Number 6, God's pattern for the home. That parents should bring up their children to know and fear God. Read the scripture when you have time. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9. Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, stuff that's changed in schools, and they don't allow prayer, they don't allow this, and they don't allow that. God's pattern is, this stuff happens in the home. And it is still the parent's responsibility to train your child, to bring that child up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. It is still God's pattern. And I like what he says in Ephesians chapter 6, children, obey your parents in the law, for this is right. This is the first commandment with the promise. Why? Number 1, that it may be well with thee. Number 2, that you may live long in the earth. The reason why a lot of young people have a lot of issues is because they don't listen to their parents. The reason why a lot of young people's lives have been cut short because they hadn't listened to their parents. Right? And in a lot of cases, because the parent hadn't done their job.
That's right.
Isn't that right? And I'm glad Previn did it because I still remember when Previn preached that sermon on Adam Wellsdown when he said that in Mark chapter 3, verse 27, a strong man, the enemy cannot move in and spoil your house unless he first bind the strong man. In too many cases, the strong man is bound in prison, divorced, out of the home, strung out on drugs, all these other things, and that leaves open access to the family. for the devil. And he gets in and he destroys homes. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And when you do anything outside of God's pattern, you're going to have problems. Now, sis, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to ask, verify,
Who reversed the order?
Huh?
Because you said that Eve wasn't supposed to, the serpent.
Who reversed the order?
Yeah, who reversed it?
The servant.
The serpent. He deceived Eve. Eve wasn't supposed to deal with the serpent. He came to her. Adam was her head. Adam was the leader. But instead of going to Adam, he went to Eve.
So why
And
did
he
he go to
deceived
that?
Eve rather than Eve saying, hey, let me go talk to my husband about this.
Hello?
She listened to what he said, and then she gave it to him. He allowed her, he allowed her to usurp his authority. He didn't step up and say, hey, no, we can't have this. God said do it this way. He didn't do that. And because he, just laid down basically his authority and gave it over to Eve, they both paid for it. She was deceived, and I don't know what to call him. He just wimped out. There's another word, but I can't say it. He just pumped out.
He was all right, as long as he was by himself.
Straight up.
When did he put that woman on there? He had problems.
Pumped out. Go ahead.
If you look at, when Mike talked about the lead
Okay.
and the cleave, when Mike talked about how Jesus said, you're gonna have family, your own household against you. If you look back, a lot of times, we knew about it long years ago, during slavery. That's how the clan got started. Hey, you gotta be in, become clannish. Somebody want to do more than the other, and they couldn't bounce out. Then you had some people in families that had even people that did stuff like killing folks, like Bonnie and Clyde. People, now you against the family, and you see that problem at family reunions. People want to be in a clique so much that they will choose power instead of choosing God. And the Bible says, if you have to choose between the two, you choose what God says do.
Next week, we're going to talk about keys to successful relationship. Following week, we have vacation Bible study, vacation Bible school, so we won't have this class. And then our last class will be the last last Wednesday in June. And we're going to talk about our relationship with God, the most important relationship that we can have. So you
will be here next week.
Yeah, we'll have this class next Wednesday. All right.
I would just want to just thank Mike